my pre-introduction is that we actually met a long time ago when you had started PersistIQ doing right
That's right.
cadences automation
Yeah.
around, and we integrated Chili Pepper with PersistIQ to make sure people can book meetings. PersistIQ. Then you moved on to create Scratchpad, which got a lot of end user love. I remember our team members adopted it with PLG motion, and now you're on to new things. So that's what actually. You want add anything to my description?
All the pain along the way, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, I was going to do that. I feel like we should get a medal when we survive a cycle, like, and we should
Uh,
show our chest like an old general, the cycle we survived, like the subs.
surviving
So,
revenue or sales tech. That's
so
gotta, yeah.
that's a good script for a movie, I think. From the COVID when we all thought we were going to die to then the opposite happened, then the things shrunk. And I think,
Mhm.
okay, cool. So what we did, we on the sales side, we've organized by theme, and we covered first we covered prospecting. Although there's so much going on prospecting, I'm sure we'll have more sessions on it. But the cool stuff that people do around prospecting with AI. Then we did a couple of sessions on meeting preparation and meeting follow-up. So that's what made me think of Scratchpad, because I remember our account executives would always use Scratchpad to do the follow-up of the meeting. And
Yeah.
actually, even the preparation of the meeting, they would look, and maybe you can explain what Scratchpad is. I mean, I guess you will. So that's part of it. And then you explained to me that you had gone much broader, which makes a lot of sense. So that's something for sure we'd like to discuss. So with all that say, I'll leave it to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here and mostly been heads down lately and and so it's great to step out and share some of the learnings that my team and I have had, and also some of the things we're seeing and what we're working on. So I'll speak very openly here. That's part of my style, and in the hopes that you all can pick something up from it. If you have any questions, ask. We'll try to pay attention to the chat here, but also happy to connect after this as well if you want to go deeper. So why don't
Yeah,
I?
on that topic, I will monitor the chat and try to place the
Perfect.
question at the right time there, just to make it more interactive. So if I sometimes interrupt you, I apologize in advance, like I
Well,
just
please
did.
do. Yeah.
But that's the thought, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely don't like to hear myself just talk for a long time. So if you have questions and want to jump in, that would make it better. So why don't I do this? Let me just share a little bit more about the journey that we've been on, and then I think we can get to some of the things that we're seeing in teams deploying AI, and have some stuff to even show you all. Certainly can talk about the meeting prep and follow up, but also more broadly on what we're doing with AI and what we're seeing
Yeah,
companies with AI.
that's right.
Cool. All right. Well, let me just start with my own background and kind of journey here. So I've been building in the sales tech space for too long. I should think about the numbers here. So it's been over 10 years. It was not by intention that we started down the sales tech space. It's been with the same co-founder. We've done a few companies together. We started with PersistIQ, which was outbound for sellers. So really think of it as like an outreach sales loft type competitor. We all started around the same time, and we went through Y Combinator with that. It was born out of our own needs, frankly. Marketo existed, Salesforce existed, nothing existed for sellers. Built it, grew it, sold it, vowed we'd never do sales tech again. And before the transaction actually closed with PersistIQ, we had started Scratchpad. And the thesis there was, it's this nagging idea that we just couldn't let go. We saw all of this software that was built for marketing and for sales. Yet, if you actually studied how an individual salesperson worked, they were duct taping solutions together, these general purpose applications. So, tons of spreadsheets, random task managers, note applications. And what really sealed it for us is we were shadowing one seller one day. Literally, my co-founder and I sat behind him for a couple hours and just watched him work. And he was using the comments section of a task object in Salesforce as his notepad. And that kind of that cracked the dam, if you will. We're like, this just is not okay. This shouldn't exist. And so the idea there was build something for sellers. And that sounds simple enough to do, but when you really dig into it, you're dealing with a wide range of how, human behavior, but also company behavior and what they're looking for. So I won't go too deep into that, but I think, some of you may have used it or heard about it. I think we did a great job there. We built what we called the workspace for sellers. It got crazy adoption. Individual sellers would use it and sign up, or sign up and use it. And if I were to sum it up, it made Salesforce easier to work with, right? Now, it did a lot more than that, but that's enough for anyone in sales to say, yeah, that actually means something. So we did that, worked beautifully well, and then the market downturn happened after COVID, right? So companies were cutting sales teams and sales tool spend. We survived that, and then AI came into the picture. And I think there have been multiple waves that have come. I don't know if you all remember, everyone was talking about Gen AI. And then the whole wave was like, well, how do you generate like copy? And there was a bunch of companies that came out and then they went away 6 months later. And so we kind of took a beat and said, well, let's figure out where this is actually going to fit into sales. And we landed on two distinct use cases that we solved for. One of them was updating the CRM. In the world of AI, you probably don't need your individual sellers to be updating every field. Now, I still think there's a case to be made for you don't want everything auto-updated. You actually want the person who's managing a deal to know the information. Well, knowing that information, sometimes it's helpful when you type it in. It helps us process. But there's a lot of other things that sellers don't need that, let's say, marketing needs or product needs. Like, what are the competitors that came up, or what objections happened on this call? That you can use AI to auto-update the CRM. You can take that workload off the seller. So we did that. We baked it into the product, and it worked beautifully well. Then we built what we call the deal agent, right? So there's Ask AI, or sorry, there's AI CRM updates that would auto-update the CRM, and then there's Ask AI. And that was deals are complex. There's emails and there's calls and all the stuff around them. You should be able to ask AI a question about a deal and get a good answer. And what existed at the time then was ChatGPT was really taking off. This was well before Anthropic had released Claude, and Claude had gained the adoption that it did. And what we saw were just people were manually uploading context to ChatGPT. You create a project and upload some emails and what have you. And we learned a lot by doing that. One, we learned there's, capabilities of AI are very real. They're incredibly promising, and they take so much to actually get useful outputs. And second, most organizations, while they wanted to use it, were not quite ready for it. We still had a bunch of companies coming to us and just saying, hey, can you have a better way just to work with Salesforce? And so I think the maturity level of AI across companies is very broad. And so that was what we learned about the market. And then what we learned about the product was there started to be this decoupling. So think of, and it's not just Scratchpad. Frankly, there's all of these companies that have existed in the past. When I say past, I mean that started before AI, right? So you could put Salesforce in there, Gong in there, Calendly, although maybe not so much. Chili Piper, you guys started well before this too, but you guys are doing more like really cool infrastructure and scheduling. I'm more talking about the applications that have interfaces for sellers that existed. And we started to see this shift where I don't know if that's going to be the surface area anymore. Most organizations wanted to have their sellers work out of defined surface areas like Salesforce. We heard that all the time. Sellers need to be in Salesforce. They need to update in there. Well, Scratchpad made it easier. They come in through there. But what we started to see is a shift where the LLM models themselves started to become a surface area. And you see that now with, I can't see hands, but it'd be awesome to do a poll to see how many people are actually using Claude on a daily basis, or ChatGPT. Like, that's become a surface area, and that's now also becoming one that most sellers or most organizations are requiring their teams to do. So we started to see feel this decoupling between the surface area and then what powers AI. So long-winded way of saying,
let me do a poll while you talk, and I'll be more specific. Do your salespeople use Claude daily for their work? All right, keep going.
Cool. And I realized I wasn't sharing a screen, so you all are just looking at me wave my hands like a crazy person here. So I'll share a screen. just so you have something else to look at. Um, so this was just, again, what we did with Scratchpad, the interface to Salesforce. But what we ended up doing was making a pretty big decision about a year and a half ago, and that was that Scratchpad will continue to exist. I think there's still a world for interfaces. I don't believe that all software is going away and everything's going to be generated real time by AI. I think there's a lot more custom generation that's going to happen, but this will continue to exist. But the real opportunity that we saw is much more around making teams AI native. And the problem that I think we saw then and that continues to exist today is how do you get an LLM? How do you get Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, any open source model that you want to work with your customer data? Because when it can, magical things come out of it. And when it's done right. But that was the struggle. And frankly, that's what we built with a lot of the AI functionality in Scratchpad, in trying to get it to automatically, do coaching moments or, these spot risky deals early or update the CRM. A lot of that was learnings in how do you get customer data to work with an LLM to do certain actions that you want. And so that's where when we started really honing in on that and focusing on that itself, it really led us to building something completely different. So this is a lot of what I'll talk about both today, just in the learnings across them. But what we are now built, it's live, it's shipped. We haven't really done any launches on it just yet, so you all are getting earlier views into this. But it is context, what we call context infrastructure. The ability to get an LLM to work really well with your customer data and customer context and business context so that you can get the outputs that you want. Much longer introduction than I anticipated, but wanted to give you all the full story of kind of where we are now. So what I can do is maybe just jump into some demos on what's possible when you have great context and a really strong and smart LLM, because these models are getting so good. They've gotten so smart. It started, I think it was 4.6 with Opus and Claude in what was it, October, November timeframe that everyone was like, oh, that was kind of like the oh shit moment. And it's gone bonkers since then. So the models are getting
November last year.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, I can geek out on that for hours. We can talk about perspectives and what have you. But I do want to make this somewhat useful for you all. So if it's helpful, should I jump into some demos now, or do you want me to talk a little bit more about why context?
Demos are great. Let's do demo. I will tell you, I messed up with the poll for a couple of them. I put both answers as yes. That's why it took so long. But no, I got it, and I could have put the two answers as yes because almost everybody answered yes.
Okay.
The question is, do your reps use Claude daily for their job? 16 of the 18 say yes. 2 out of 18 say no. So it's really happening. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, and it wasn't like this in January. We were
right.
talking to most companies, and it really felt like a big shift happened around February, March timeframe where everyone's getting Claude. Now, what we're still seeing across most organizations is, oh, we got it. Why'd you get it? Our board told us we needed to do it, or it came from a high level, some high level mandate. And most organizations are still trying to figure out what to do with it. And so what I'm going to talk a lot about here is, and I'll get to the demo, but I think it's important to talk about context for a second, and maybe this will do the right job, is what we generally see is most organizations that get Claude, the next step is, well, how do I give Claude the right context? And they're using connectors. I'll connect, Salesforce has an MCP. There was an open source one. If you're using, basically everyone's trying to come up with an MCP so that you can connect it to Claude. And that gets you a decent way, right? Like if you're doing use cases like summarize this last call that I had, or more narrower context window type stuff, it can work. Where a lot of companies we see start hitting walls, and a lot of them don't even know they've hit this, because when you start asking a bigger question, what the models will do is they'll sample instead of actually looking at every deal. And so this is where context comes in, right? So connectors just give access, but what we end up seeing is you need to have this, what we call this context layer. So it's unifying all the data across all your sources. It's resolving those identities. It's building out activity map. It's mapping all the relationships between activities. It's building out timelines. and it's doing this before an LLM ever talks to it. So that way, when you ask a question of Claude, it's working with pre-resolved context. And if you ask a question, your VP asks a question, your manager asks a question, it's all going to point to the same context. Whereas when you're using connectors, it's having to rebuild that context every time you ask. And so this is where it ends up happening is a lot of times it's error prone. The problem is you won't actually see the error because it sounds really confident, but you're using a probabilistic system to get deterministic answers. The other piece, most companies haven't gotten to this point yet. I think it's going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months is a focus on cost. The last 6 months were just like, let's just get Claude and burn and figure out the use cases. And now it's like, well, we spent all these tokens. What did we actually get out of it? Which is a great question, but a lot of token cost is going to rebuilding context. It's doing it every single time you ask a question. That's just unnecessary burn. And then they break all the time. So anyway, that's the background on the context engine that we're building, and then I'll talk about the use cases that companies are building on top. So
I think it's a very deep question that you raised on this idea. Is it better to prepare all the data, or is it what the LLMs are good for to fetch that data in real time? And I can see how. I had lunch with a group lunch with the founder of Snowflake 3 weeks ago, and I asked him, I said, aren't you concerned that the LLMs just fetch the data? And he says, no, because first of all, costs will be out of control. And most importantly, the governance will be out of control. So people may do random things and access different data. And as soon as you have a certain company size, you want to make sure that these things are under control. So I guess that made me feel better because if the LLMs do everything, then there's not much room for.
Yeah, and I don't think they will. It's, a great way to, or one way to think about it is, these LLMs have gotten really, really good. They're really smart, right? Like PhD level. But if you were to hire somebody on your team with that level of intelligence, they still need the right context. They need to know, the project that you're working on. They need to know their teammates. They need to know the business strategy. They need to know the process. All of these things can radically change the output that, let's say, 2 PhDs will give you. And so, frankly, and that's one of the reasons why we decided to go all in on this. It is really difficult to do. It's easy to connect a couple sources to an LLM and get some outputs, but to really get useful, meaningful outputs in revenue AI, there's a lot of depth in order to do this. And I think you talked about, why the cost is a big one, but sensitive data is another one that's coming up. If you connect a source, there's nothing that's calling out, hey, don't sync like board level emails or termination type emails or these types of emails, right? So that's another part that you want. And then the other piece that isn't talked about much yet, but very similar to cost, I think it is going to happen in the next 6 months, is portability. When you build your context into a harness of an LLM, so you're building all these connectors to Claude, you are locked into Claude. You are locked into their ecosystem. And, I'll just personal anecdote, a lot of my use cases and usage right now is shifted over to Codex in the last few weeks. I found that Codex 5.5 is giving me much, much better outcomes than Claude is. And I still use both, but the beauty is I have one context layer that I now have connected to Claude, I have connected to Codex, and custom applications that I'm building for the team. But that context layer is portable. It'll go to anything that comes up. So these are some of the things that I think will come up in the next few months. So
I'm surprised to hear that about Codex and Claude, but we can keep that for later. Let's get into the demo.
Can't wait to see it. I mean, listen, I have no affiliation with either of them, but Codex has been awesome the last few weeks.
All right.
That's been more of my go-to. Cool. So let me show you all. So I basically took, or not, I did. My teammates helped here, Eaton and Nate. So Nate's on our marketing side, Eaton's on product. They're here to fill in any gaps that I may miss on use cases, but also to share additional context. So what we did is there's a lot of sensitive data in our customers. We don't want to share that. So we just did versions of it with dummy data here. So what I'm going to first talk about is AI CRM update. So this is a use case that I think is relevant for any sales team. Your team is having conversations. How do you get that conversation into the CRM without them doing any work? Okay. So I'll show you one way of building this. Um, and in Clear Skies, we build, this is the product here. The core part of the product is this context graph. It's something that your sellers would never see. It's infrastructure. We also have what we call workflows and agents. So think of them as aspects of, like if you used N8N or Zapier or stuff like that, it's baked into it, right? So it's very easy. Frankly, I think that's become a commodity now, very much like how call recording has become a commodity. So those are some of the parts that I'll show you. But in this case, what we would do is we would just write in natural language what you want. So here, we wrote this out. It's like we just want to automatically update the next step field after a sales call. We can give it a little bit more context, like what roles, but also say, hey, before you update anything, decide whether the call actually contains anything useful to update. Don't just update random stuff. And if it does, then make the update. So here, we would just write in natural language what we want to happen. The system then takes that natural language and turns it into logic. So you've probably, if you've used workflow building stuff, you've seen this before, but like this is where you would have to start. My brain just doesn't think this way. I look at these and it's complex, but this builds it for you and then gives you the ability to refine the conditions, add filters, do groupings and or logic, whatever you want. But the starting point is just natural language. So here you can see it all
Pouyan,
modified.
I have a question.
Yeah,
What we're looking at right now is not the plan that Claude produces. It's your own implementation, right? So
that's
you're
right.
okay.
Yeah, that's right. So this is in Clear Skies where you could build a new workflow, right? So you would just describe what you want. Um, I believe we may be using Claude on the back end. One of the model, I forget what model we're using for this, but you could also do this with Claude, right? This is what I was saying. This is becoming somewhat more of a commodity where it's generating code, right? This layer is an abstraction to code, and these
Right.
models have become really good at generating code. Now there's still nuances to getting it to work well. But yeah, you could use Clear Skies to do this. Um, it would generate this for you. And then the benefit is, since it has all the context, you could just pick a call, run a test, and it'll go through every single step, show if there's failures. This is the type of stuff that Claude won't do as well. Like you're going to have to know to do this and really write the test plans and what have you and say, yep, like, listen, everything's passed. We went through the system. And then, you push it live and then you can just start seeing the runs. You would have to build this yourself in Claude if you wanted this level of depth. But that's really it, right? Like in order to create a system that can automatically update any field you want in your CRM from calls and emails, we're now talking about maybe 15 minutes to build it out and then test it for another 5 to 10, and then you can deploy it live. And it's not
I
just
didn't
about
notice
it.
something. I didn't notice something, Pouyan. Did you instruct which fields to update, or you left that open to the LLM to
Yeah.
decide?
No. You can get, so this is the stuff that in working with LLMs. So you instruct it. You're telling it deterministically in this workflow, I want you to update the next step field, or I want you to update medpic fields, or I want you to update these fields. What you could also do though is say, use your best judgment. Look at the call, see what kind of call it is, determine what fields are most relevant, and then just update those fields. So you now have all that. You can choose what you want to do. And this is where it does get tricky in working with LLMs because they are probabilistic. So you can go down that path. But if you want a very deterministic workflow to update this one specific field, you know that you've got that locked into this workflow.
Right.
That's it. It's that simple. What I can do now is show another workflow that we see a lot of companies building, which is the pre-call brief. 38 minutes, an hour before me going into a call. How do I get the right information that I need about this call so that I'm well prepared going into it? And this is one where context matters a lot because you don't want to just look at the previous calls you've had. You want to look at emails that have come back and forth, calls that have happened, maybe entries that have happened in the CRM by other people, support tickets, calendar events that have maybe been logged. So this is where that rich context really matters. And, in terms of setting it up, again, you could do this there's all sorts of workflow builders. Slack has one. You could build it in Claude. You could use Clear Skies for this. Frankly, that part of it doesn't matter as much. It's whatever works well for you. I'm going to show you what we did here in our case. So again, just in natural language, we wrote out to the best of our ability what we thought we needed. The system then actually builds out the logic. You can refine any specific parts that you want. You can run a test just to make sure, yep, it's working well. I got the output that I want. And this part, again, is really important because you're creating a iteration loop before you're actually pushing anything live to production in your team and making sure you're getting it to the right level that you want. And then that's it. And in this case, this just goes to Slack. So I can show you, a lot of what we're talking about for sales, but frankly, I use this. I'm showing you a live workflow that we have for my co-founder. Him and I join customer calls a lot. And so he's chosen to run one for 10 minutes. So 10 minutes before a call starts, we're looking at external calls that meet certain criteria. It's generating a brief, and then it's sending it to him in Slack. So that's the workflow. And then the agent that you can call is called the pre-call brief agent. And so this is where you can put a lot of the depth of the prompt that you want to run, which model you want to use, the settings on the model for reasoning effort, verbosity, and how to actually invoke that agent. So this is, again, it's all made very simple in order to be able to ship these things now. But all of this works because we have our context in one place. And it's deterministic, and it can call it every time, and no matter who calls it, we're getting the same answer. So those are some of the pieces that we're building on top. Let me take a quick pause here because I feel like I'm just chatting a lot. Any questions? None yet. Okay.
Let me ask a couple
Yeah.
of questions. So as I said, that was the theme of the last two sessions. And one presenter explained that he wanted to control what the sales reps can do. So, for example, he won't let them go outside and query the web and do something like that. Is your expectation that beyond the context, then the reps could just also ask questions and use directly either Claude or your system to go broader, or the expectation that they will use with that workflow?
No, that's a great question. And so this ties to the next use case I was going to talk about, which could be QBR prep, or what you just talked about, which is I want to go outside of it. So what I showed you so far is AI CRM updates and then a pre-call brief. And that's like a workflow that's run with context. But most of you are using Claude. What I'll show you now is how you can use this in Claude, which is one of the primary use cases. And so, Nicholas, this is where you can build a skill in Claude to do this and also go search the web and look at whatever other tooling that you want or whatever other context that you want. So in Claude, you would just ask the question that you want. So here it could be like auto-generated QBR. I care about these types of things to look at. And so in generating that QBR, it would look at your customer context through Clear Skies, but then that skill that you write could also say, well, search the web. Look at publicly available information or 10Ks or whatever information you want. And then Claude is generating this for you, but it's doing it a lot faster and it's doing it a lot more consistently because you have this context graph or layer that has all your customer context, and then you can just build the skill to do whatever else you want.